Welcome to the Grizzly Times podcast with Louisa Wilcox, a place devoted to all things grizzly, where we interview scientists, managers, Native Americans, and others about their perspectives and experience with bears and their ecosystems. This comes at a critical time in a complex debate about grizzly bears, with the recent restoration of endangered species safeguards for the Yellowstone bear, but a new proposal to strip protections for Glacier's grizzlies, and when warming temperatures and development are transforming the bear's world. We hope that you find the information and views offered here useful as you shape your own conclusions. This is Louisa Wilcox with Grizzly Times, and the last of 4 episodes of my interview with Estella Leopold, the last remaining offspring of the legendary conservationist writer and philosopher Aldo Leopold. Our conversation here ranges from grizzly bears to climate change and the legacy of her father and the Leopold family, including younger relatives who are emerging leaders in the environment and scientific research. Estella and I talked about the grizzly bear, of course, and the litigation broiling at the time over the government's removal of endangered species protections. Here's a bit of our conversation. Even with the grizzly bear work that I do, we're in court to try to prevent grizzly bear hunting around Yellowstone, outside Yellowstone Park, and the tribes.
Oh, that's such a horrible development. I can't imagine it. Starker would turn over in his grave.
I'm sure he would. I mean, his whole...
And Dad.
Estella does not mince words about climate change denial, species extinctions, and threats such as the Dakota Access Pipeline. She also reflects here on what her father might think about such things today.
Well, it's astonishing that people are so easily swayed by the deniers of climate change, because of course that's just false. Mm-hmm. We can see it's perfectly obvious what's happening in the droughts in Africa.
Right.
What's happening in fire sequences in here in the West, in California. Unusual hurricanes. And why should people be reluctant to listen to the climatologists who say, hey, as the marine temperature, as the water increases, the hurricane frequency will become more frequent or more devastating or both. Mm-hmm. And that's science, and that's what's happening, so all we have to do is realize it and admit it.
Right.
So it's a shame if we put our heads in the sand.
Yeah. So all your work on paleontology and looking at deep time and climate change and, makes you realize that, 99.9% of the species that once lived on Earth are extinct. How does that view of sort of long time, deep time, square with like living in this world now, and looking at the fate of endangered species and what's happening with climate change?
Well, Louisa, as I view it, the scale of extinction going on now, and the threats of more is certainly comparable to some of the worst natural disasters in the geologic record.
Right.
And what we're facing with climate change is going to be much worse in the near future. Yeah. So, these are facts.
Yeah. Yeah. Would your dad be heartbroken, or would he?
I think he would be dismayed.
Yeah, yeah.
He really would. And one of your questions was he optimistic?
Yeah.
And I wanted to tell you that when he wrote a letter to Bill Vogt was head of the Pan American Union.
Okay.
Or he was a very high administrator in the Pan American Union. And an author of one of the first books in conservation, Bill Vogt.
Huh.
He wrote him a letter, and his dad said, these are really hard times with so many discouraging developments. And he said all we can do, Bill, is do the best we can.
Right.
And that's, I think, quoted in Kurt Miney's book, but I think it's a very important view that he kept trying to be optimistic, even though it looked very gray and black in the future.
Right. Well, how did that shape your view? I mean, you've seen a lot of change in your life, so many years after he died. I mean,
very sad. Yeah, we hate to see the population increase and development so exorbitant, and above all, I think the administrators overlooking some of the major problems that relate to proposed developments, such as the Keystone Pipeline.
Right.
And and the government disdaining the views of the native peoples. And the native peoples, they are much more understanding of the system than the administrators. And in that case, they're absolutely right. Trying to make a path underneath a river, is a very is to ask for all kinds of trouble in the future. Right. It doesn't sound like a delicately balanced, difficult construction.
Estella had many students who she helped launch on illustrious careers. She introduces a few of them here.
Oh, well, I was very, very impressed with these young people. Peter Dunwoody became quite the botanist and is in the state of Washington very much involved in helping save a number of rare and endangered plant species of the prairies. And he's been one of the people that helped with the early burns in the state. The prescribed burns work with Jim Agee, the fireman.
Yeah.
And they, in fact, did this Yellow Island burn together every couple of years, and that was a model in the state. Just let the whole island burn. It became a perfectly beautiful stand of Doug firs.
Oh, yeah.
Little bits of prairie and lovely spring flowers.
Oh, that must have been a delight.
So Peter is still a special resource. And then Kathy Whitlock, who I know has become such a wonder. And her love of the out of doors has kept her on the edge of these ecological issues, and she's a good botanist.
Yes.
She has good broad training in geology.
Right.
She understands climate.
Yes.
And climate systems. And you can't get a better rounded citizen than Kathy.
Yeah.
And I think her leadership, including the botanical work she's done in Wyoming, bringing a realization of what the forest history can tell us about the importance of fire as a factor in the environment, it's just been astounding. It's been very important.
The Leopold kids went on to have their own shacks. Here, Estella shares about some of them.
It looked like all of you kids, or most of you, had your own little experiment with buying a piece of land and doing what you could to restore what had been there. And you have had a piece of property near Golden. And how did you arrive at that? And what was that experience?
Well, I think I've written about how as we left, we wanted to each have our own shacks in the areas where we were. And I was in Denver. Finally managed to find this property up on Ralston Creek near Black Hawk Mountain, and decided that it would be a wonderful, just a getaway place to be outdoors and to work with a primitive cabin which had been built in the homesteading period way back, and much fun. But most of their shacks, like Carl's cabin in Costa Rica, they did a tremendous amount of restoration work, bringing back the tropical forest.
Gosh, what amazing.
in a just incredible story, and it's so beautiful now. But the Luna's land, I would say, was mainly to keep the cows off of the land.
Right.
Although he did have a horse or two, so there was grazing. In my case, it was definitely fencing, keeping out the cows, and keep the government away from poisoning the coyotes.
Right.
Because when I bought that land, there were signs up saying "peligro," the poisoning, and they had apparently thrown strychnine pellets out of the airplane originally, and I just I went to the government groups and said, no, this land is verboten, we're going to protect it.
Right.
So just keeping the cows off was a good restorative practice. And
right.
I did not do any planting at all.
Really?
It was Carl that really did a restoration job in Costa Rica.
Yeah.
Estella clearly has her father's storytelling gene. Here's an excerpt from a 1999 paper. The romance of a lost biome dominated by Ice Age mastodons and a warmer climate when prairie Indian cultures were in their heyday can be inferred from fossil evidence and can be read in the lines of the pollen story. Here, Estella shares her approach to story, which underscores the comprehensiveness of her thinking, like her father's.
So, have you thought consciously about your role in storytelling, or is it just something that you do and comes naturally? And
well, in teaching, it was a very useful way of getting over some very complicated
right.
data. Just put it in the form of a story.
Right.
And the students understood it, and asked questions about it. It was just fun.
Right. Right. And you taught for decades.
Yeah,
right?
I taught until 2001.
Yeah.
Which is quite a while.
It is quite a while. And
14 years or something.
Yeah. So you're watching students probably all over and doing different things, and probably maybe not going into your line of work, but
and enjoying the students. Gee, they were great.
Yeah.
And advising them to take certain courses, watching them flower. It was really fun.
Right. Discover things that they didn't think they were.
And there had been organized at our university a research center called the Quaternary Research Center, which was full of people interested in ice ages and beyond.
Right.
And that meant that there was a tremendous focus on the relationship to early peoples and archaeology. And that's still the case.
Right.
We still have it, and we like it. It's very nice.
Yeah.
So it pulled in people from all kinds of different departments that worked together. Now that doesn't mean they got NSF grants together, but what they did was share stories, lectures. Their students got a good broad background in climatology, archaeology, geology, chemistry, whatever, botany.
Right.
The shack property has been preserved by the Leopold Foundation, which was started by the family. The place has become a mecca for conservationists around the world. Estella and several relatives serve on the board and face the challenge of aging buildings and lots of visitors. But ecological discoveries are still being made, such as the role of dogs in maintaining the prairie.
You go back to the shack for regular meetings, it sounds like, and reunions and...
Oh, we have about 3 times a year. We have board meetings, and then we have a big picnic at the shack and roast something or cook something. Yeah. And we're trying hard to take care of the shack.
Oh.
Unfortunately, there's now a lot of traffic, people that have read the same county book, and they want to visit this place.
All right.
And we have too many visitors.
Oh, you do?
Well, that's all right, I guess. I don't...
So
I worry about the numbers of people. It's just excessive.
So is the shack itself holding up to the weather, and do you have to do
yes, but it's pretty old. I mean, it was probably built about 1900, and the so-called bunkhouse, which the boys built as a wing on the main cabin, which is just rectangular, they built without stopping to make a proper foundation for the bunkhouse. So what they had was cornerstones that were solid, but nothing in between. So right now, I see the paths of the mice make go under the boards and get under the floor, under the shack floor, and there's a lot of mice inhabiting the building. I hear. But anyhow, the whole effort now is to rebuild the footing under the bunkhouse, and it's going to cost quite a bit of money, which we have in hand, ready to go. But
good.
we have to find the right party to do it.
Yeah.
And what they have to do is basically take a few boards away and reinforce those cornerstones. The two corners of that bunkhouse need to have good solid cement footstones just in there. And then after that, they can start to build a foundation under the other parts of the bunkhouse, which I hope they're going to start doing soon.
Yeah.
It's getting pretty old.
Yeah, that is old, and fairly humid, wet.
And the snow piles up against it in the winter.
Right, exactly. So your sister Nina had a house nearby, right? And
It had a house, and until she passed on, she was in that house, and that's where the director lives now.
Okay.
The CEO. And she and Charlie built this house, which is really a beautiful place. Charlie was such a good designer. He was no quitting. He was really good. It's a log house built from pines that we planted.
Oh, how cool!
As children.
Yeah.
And a beautiful, massive fireplace that Charlie, being a good mason, had watched over while these people he had hired built this nice fireplace.
Cool.
Good big hearth place so you can cook over that fire. And they have, there's a basement where they used to have offices. Nina's and Charlie each had an office. Charlie and the CEO was working down there. And now it's all turned over. We hated to give it up because it was family.
Yeah.
But it's being used.
Yeah.
And the family there is very happy. They have children, but no dog. And you know what? The dog idea is very important for prairies and deer. Nina and Charlie always had a dog.
Yeah.
And the dog was always running around in the...
Right.
So the difference between the shack prairie and the prairie at Nina's house, Nina's and Charlie's house, is night and day. Flowers were all blooming like crazy at Nina's and Charlie's house. But at the shack area, the deer had been eating off all the flowers. And Nina figured out that it had to do with the dog.
Right.
The dog would scare the deer at her house.
Yeah.
And I don't know what's happening anymore, but it's a notable
change
observation, but it's a fact.
Yeah.
That dog made a difference.
Yeah.
New leadership in the Leopold Foundation is coming up in the family, and one new board member will be Estella's grandniece, Claire. Estella tells this story about Claire, who came with her once to a meeting of the prestigious American Philosophical Society, which Estella is a member of. You get the sense that the next generation of Leopolds is continuing the proud family tradition.
Well, I'm glad you've got a grand niece, who's coming on. That'll be great.
Claire.
Yeah.
She's gonna be a good plus.
Yeah.
One time, I took her to one of the American philosophical meetings.
Oh, right.
And here's this little kid. She comes up to about here on me, and she was just in college. And we had these illuminaries speaking to this huge group of American Philosophical Society, and they were talking about the future of, under climate change, of this and that and the other. And one of them was an industrialist, and little Claire stood up and challenged this guy who was a maker of cars, I don't know which company. She said, "You've covered a lot of ground, sir, but you haven't told us what you can do about the automobile industry that will help us with the climate change." You know, whatever it was,
Whoa.
she was very clear about the questions.
Yeah.
And he stumbled around for an answer. So that's Claire.
That's
Kadansky.
great. That's
She's
a good sign.
She's something.
That's
She's
really
Madeline Leopold's child, and Madeline is Luna's daughter.
So
Very articulate woman, lawyer.
Oh.
We end with Estella's views about our prospects on this earth. I will leave her doing what she did throughout our conversation, asking about my opinion. Throughout our time together, I was continually reminded of her humility and curiosity, which are clearly family traits. You don't want to hear my answer to her question, which is kind of dumb. And anyhow, each of us has to find our own answers.
So, given all the changes that you've seen in your lifetime, that your dad documented, the changes in humanity, the changes in population, everything, are you optimistic about our future on this earth?
I wish I could be very optimistic. Unfortunately, I'm very worried. Well, it isn't so unfortunate. It's just being practical that I don't see enough concern at the highest levels, and certainly in this administration, terrified is the word of what can happen when we do not get a proper director of the Park Service or of the Fish and Wildlife Service or of EPA.
Oh gosh.
And scares me to death, so it's hard to be optimistic, but I guess we just have to keep trying harder. How do you feel? I'm interested in what you're...
At the end of the interview, Estella, ever gracious, turns my thank you around to one from her. Wow, the honor is all mine.
Well, I cannot, I'm here with Estella Leopold, and I'm absolutely delighted to be talking to you today, and thank you so much for taking the time and offering your perspectives and your wisdom.
Oh, Louisa, this is such a treat to know you and hear a little more about what you've been doing, and to the perspective that you demonstrate with your questions is marvelous.
Oh, wow.
I want to compliment you
Oh,
on
well,
that.
thank you. Thank you so much.